Hey guys, welcome back. So today in this video we shall be talking about Russia in Ukraine and yes, why it's losing. Now, before I get into this, I have someone very special I'd like to invite onto this show. His name is Mr. Ivan, the Russian propagandist.
Russia's winning the war. You see? All these things are four-dimensional chess. Russia intended to lose hundreds of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of tanks in a single battle. The 500-man offensive was designed to whittle down your forces and distract everyone, as was the convoy outside Kiev. There was no intention to hold the ground outside of Kiev, or outside of, whatever that city is on the east. There was none of that. It was all...
Okay, so, I apologize for this. The problem is, this is very much the gist of all the arguments that say that Russia's winning. And as you probably can guess by now, is bullshit. You see, if you are losing a war, you are failing to reach your objectives that you have set. You are failing to complete the goals that you want. And Russia has proven that they are losing because they're failing in every regard. They have failed to denazify Ukraine and achieve regime change with the removal of Volodymyr Zelensky from power. They have failed at demilitarizing Ukraine and making a neutral state, so will never join NATO. And they have failed at taking significant territory in terms of invasion, where they have been pushed out of lots of territory. And at the moment is a stalemate where, in fact, Russia's now being pushed back in many areas. This is the whole problem. It's that it makes no sense. So first we'll start with the initial point. Regime change, denazification. Much of the denazification is based around the concept of the Azov Battalion, who are a very extreme right-wing group. These guys are now being lauded as heroes in Ukraine because, well, at the end of the day, they held off Russia even and protected the civilians of Mariupol, even whilst they were trapped and had no ammunition left. It was only after the actual Ukrainians told them to surrender that they actually did. And, I mean, that they had actual balls of steel. It's the same with Zelensky, too. He's now become a hero. He's now looked up upon by many people in the West as an absolutely awesome person who's holding the line for democracy against the evils of Russia and its ideology. And this is where the entire issue lies. They completely failed. They have failed at achieving the regime change they want, and they have failed at actually denazifying. In fact, many of these groups and people that they're attacking and trying to get out, they've made them stronger. Zelensky, I've talked to a lot of Ukrainians, right, on the internet, and they're saying before the war they hated Zelensky. Like they, if they were given the opportunity, they would kick that man in the backside. Now they're crying his praises because he's holding on. He didn't run away. He didn't abandon them to Putin. And that's the thing. It's that he's proven that he is capable of holding ground and that he's willing to actually, stand up for something. And that's the reality here. The other thing is that Ukraine's neutrality and demilitarization point is absolutely ridiculous now. I mean, let's be real, okay? Let's be real here. Demilitarization is hilarious. Particularly when you get the fact that the West is now just sending tanks over to Ukraine as well as potentially fighter jets sometime soon. We're sending cruise missiles, all the weapon systems you could probably poke a stick at over. And it really is quite funny, in my opinion. It makes very little sense that people keep trying to tell me how, oh yes, we taught Ukraine, they're demilitarized now. And they failed understanding the fact that, well, actually, you haven't demilitarized Ukraine because they're getting more and more militarized. In fact, Russia's spectacularly failed so much that they've made the guys that they're trying to get rid of heroes. An ideology that might be there, might not be there, or whatever it is, they've made the people there that supposedly these evil scum They've made them heroes. And they're forcibly building up Ukraine's military. Ukraine, if you asked a Ukrainian 40 years ago, do you think you'll have a Challenger 2 or an M1A1 or a Leopard 2 or a HIMARS launch system? I doubt that they're looking at you and be like, what the hell are you smoking? But now we're giving them these systems. And this is a whole issue, okay? This is the fundamental problem for Russia. It's that Ukraine is no longer a neutral country. That chance to have neutrality is gone. And it happened in 2014 with Crimea, where Russia destroyed all of the agreements that it had with Ukraine in an attempt to take more territory. Realistically, Russia is not going to win because it has failed at completing its objectives. It's going to tell you that it's completing its objectives, but it isn't because it's failed in this regard. Ukraine actually went from about 40% for NATO to now 80% of civilians are full NATO joint, like being part of a NATO unit. And this is the whole crazy thing, right? And this war has proven that Ukraine will get into NATO. That's the reality of it. You know, at the end of this war, most people are expecting that Ukraine will be part of NATO. You know, like that's just the reality of it. Because at the end of the day, they've proven that they're strong enough, they're capable enough. They're not just going to be this little drag on the actual full force of NATO that, you know, pulls them back and holds them, and then makes them capable of defending themselves. It's going to be the opposite. It's going to prove that it's worth having. In fact, it's severely weakened Russia. And this is the whole issue. It's that at the end of the day, Russia has spectacularly failed with just the war in Ukraine. Because there's other factors. First off, NATO expansionism. Oh yeah. This is the funny thing, right? Russia went into this war supposedly because of NATO expansionism. And yet, funnily enough, NATO's borders with Russia now have doubled since the war started. Hell, even like the Swedish and I think the Swiss are making a statement on this. You know when you got the Swiss joining up on a side, you've done something catastrophically wrong. The Finnish are in there, they're now part of NATO, so they're pretty much doubling the land border that NATO has with Russia. And it's just getting terrifying for Russia right now. Honestly, if I was a deranged dictator, I'd probably be shitting myself because this is a case. Like right now, they have the most unfavorable situation in the world. Even their so-called best friend, China, is not sticking up for them. Neither is India or any other country other than a couple of terrorist states that when you're getting their validation, there's something wrong. And this is the really ironic thing here. All of Russia's biggest friends, best homies and that, aren't supporting them. They're not on their side. This whole discussion about, but would China join in if something happened? No, they wouldn't. China doesn't give a crap about Russia. Like, this is the thing, right? This war is actually good for China. Because it's making Russia more reliant upon Chinese technology, fuel, food resources, etc., etc. Russia is now entirely reliant upon China to do anything. That's the reality of it. What this has done is it's reversed the roles. It used to be China being in Russia's back pocket. Now it's Russia's in China's back pocket. India is now being turned closer to the West because of this. There was an incident a bit back where they had to ground their MiG-29 fleet, I believe, because they didn't have the parts because, well, Russia wasn't selling them to them because there might have been a shortage or whatever. Definitely nothing to do with the war in Ukraine at all, just saying. But you see, here's the problem. The problem is they had to cut exports to India, which means India, they're not going to buy weapons of China, right? They're not buying stuff of China. They're enemies. They hate the Chinese. Or at the very least, they dislike them. They are not going to buy equipment off China. They're not going to buy equipment off the US, obviously, because it's a bit too expensive. However, they are buying Rafales and Gripens, or Gripens, however you pronounce them, off of a couple of other Western nations and European countries. And this is the big thing. It's that, and they're also building an indigenously designed fighter jet. So for the time being, they're going to be reliant upon the West and themselves. They're losing control. Russia's losing control. And this is seen with Georgia, where they told a Russian ship to go F itself, and that you guys can paddle home as far as we're concerned. I mean, that shows a significant change in attitude. You know? And this is the whole problem for Russia. It's that it's achieving nothing. You know, all of its goals, like I could talk about the minor battlefield gains and all that. But at the end of the day, they're taking catastrophic losses for minimum stuff. You know, it's not worth it when you lose 1,000 soldiers for 20 meters of ground and then you lose the next day. This is what I said in my last video about the counterattack for Ukraine. But honestly, though, it is just a long, drawn-out bloody war that's really nothing is occurring. It's, quite frankly, at this point, I don't believe Russia can even win. And this is why I'm saying they're losing. It's because they're being held in, they're being held back by a country that's a fifth of their size with Cold War era equipment and a smattering of Western tanks and weapon systems. And they haven't even come across the full force of NATO yet. And they seem to think they are able to take on that. And this is the whole problem, okay? This is the issue that faces war. It's that at the end of the day, it is illogical, it is uncalled for, and Russia's allies are realising that. Russia's losing in more than one way. They're losing the propaganda war. Well, actually, no, they've already lost the propaganda war. And with this new counteroffensive, they could potentially lose the actual war. And I hope that's the case. I touch on why Ukraine hasn't launched a counteroffensive yet in my other video, but I'll just be very brief. This counteroffensive needs to be launched properly. And Ukraine, I really hope you guys are ready for it, and I hope you pull it off. Because this is something that needs to be taken serious from the West. This is where we have to step up and send our equipment over. We have to give Ukraine the required equipment to get there. If we do not, Ukraine could lose. And that is not something that we should be doing. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. My name is Isaiah Marshall. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much. Bye.